That I'm logged into Business Central, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the way it's laid out. Um, Microsoft has selected Business Central as its flagship product for small mid-market operations moving forward, and it is they've spent a lot of effort and investment of money to make the product easy to use and navigate. And certainly, it may look very different than what you're using today. My background is with Dynamics GP, and I know the layout of Business Central is certainly different and in many ways very good. So I wanted to first point that out. I think the major emphasis on the design, you can almost think of it as a cockpit in an airplane, in that you can get to anything within a keystroke or two. It's kind of like that cockpit where you got all of your dials and your switches and everything to keep you moving in the direction you need to move right in front of you. And that's really a big emphasis with Business Central. So, and as Michael indicated, the product is certainly a full ERP solution ranging from accounting to distribution to manufacturing to projects. And so there's a variety of organizations can use the product. And you'll note that as I logged in, you can see my company ID, and that'll be prominent so that you'll always know where you're logged in. You have finance, cash management, sales, and purchasing. But one of the things I wanted to mention is that the system is really role-based as well as cloud-based. And what I mean by role-based is that depending on your role within the organization, you're going to see different things on your screens. What you see will be really geared toward what you do. And also those roles actually can also drive what you have access to. Now, I'm logged in today as a business manager. You might think of that as a system administrator, so somebody that really has access to, most everything within the system. But each individual is going to be able to have an assignment that really fits their role and what they should be doing. Also, you'll notice that we have access to all of our master records across the top here. And so as I look at the top, I can come in and I can, for instance, select customers. When I move to my customer window, then I'll get a list of all of my customers. You'll notice that I have the ability to show these in a graphical format or in a list view. So there you can see that I've moved it into a list view. And all of these lists can be personalized or changed a little bit to make sure they're including the kind of information that you need. As I then drill a little further into the customer, what you're going to notice is that I have the ability to then bring up a customer. And the reason I did this is I wanted to show you just a few key points. So here on the left part of the screen, you're going to notice that I have the general information about a customer, their customer number, some of the summarized information about the activity that we've done with them, addresses, how we invoice, payment methods, shipping, etc., depending on how we interact with this customer. Over on the right-hand side, we have what we call fact boxes, and this will be true for vendors and items and chart of account numbers and so forth. Now, what I want you to take note of is that we also have the ability to attach pictures. This could be a logo, this could be a contact person. And as we go through the product, you're going to notice that we have a variety of what we call tiles. These tiles are blocks of information that, in this case, are focused very specifically to this customer, a Datum Corporation. But the idea is that you're always, when you're logged into these companies or these vendors, you'll be able to see and log into details about the interactions that you've had to date. You'll also notice that there's customer statistics here that allow you to drive into the results, see the details behind it, etc. So whether it's outstanding orders, invoices that are outstanding, payments, etc. All of that information is all within your fingertips. And then also, one thing I'm going to talk about in a little while is what's called dimensions. So Business Central is focused on what we call dimensions. So rather than, I come from a background with GP where we had segments in our chart of accounts, it's the same concept to allow us to drive reporting. but the idea here is that we can assign those dimensions, and it can be groupings or projects or departments or a variety of different things. You can define that, and then you can assign them not only at the general ledger level, which you would for reporting, but you also can define them at the subledger level. One last thing I wanted to show you is that I do also have the ability to control my screen. So you can see here that if I don't need the fact box, I simply can compress it, and then I just see the general screen overall. So I can control my screen from side to side. I also, Business Central does provide what we call quick entry. So I also can control it up and down in regards to only seeing and visualizing the fields that are necessary, but I can also expand that out if I want to add additional information. So really very flexible, very user-friendly, giving you a lot of information at your fingertips. As I continue down through the screen on the home page, I wanted to talk a little bit then about this action area. And so what this is really giving you shortcuts to the things that you do most often. So you can see here that in this particular role, I can enter sales quotes or orders or invoices. I can enter purchase orders and simply click on that, and there will hyperlink, and it'll take me in to enter a new purchase order. Now, this should look familiar to you based on what we've talked about. So what I can do here is then pick my particular vendor, and what you'll notice is then I'll have all the statistics and the tiles that are pertinent to this particular vendor. Again, I can hide that information if I choose, and I can enter a purchase order. Another thing that's really nice about Business Central in general is that I have capabilities to come in and I can personalize my screens. So what do I mean by personalizing? What I mean is I have the ability to come in here and I can determine what columns I see in my grid. So you can see that I've highlighted this grid. You also can see that there are a variety of fields that I can enter information into, and I may not need them all in my operation. So as an example, if you're a professional service-driven organization, you may be tracking jobs or projects, and you'll see that I have columns for that. But I also have the ability to hide those columns if I choose not to see them. So I can expand the number of columns, or I can take away from the number of columns. Lastly, I can come in here and I can add additional fields, and the system will then show me what fields are available to me, and then I can drag and drop those onto the screen. So I like this because it really doesn't require development work. It's really, really focused on just tailoring your screens. But you still have the ability to control that, because a lot of times people worry that anybody could come in and change the look and feel of their screens, and it really can be controlled by an administrator, as an example. So the idea here is that I have quite a bit of flexibility. As I continue on down through the screens, I wanted to make sure that we took a look at a few other things. For most of you, you probably are very familiar with Excel, and many of you may also be familiar with the idea of conditional formatting. Well, Business Central is going to give you that capability as well. So what you're going to see here with conditional formatting is I have the ability to look at these metrics and define what my thresholds are in regards to what's acceptable, what's in risk, those types of things. And it's simply a matter of setting up queues for those metrics right here on the home page and defining what my favorable and unfavorable readings would be. So as those transactions continue in and get posted through the system will react and show us the areas that we're at risk versus the areas that we're doing fine. The next thing I wanted to make sure we looked at is then the tiles, the concept that I had talked about before. So what we can do here is we have the ability to compartmentalize our data into these blocks of information. So if I'm interested in looking at my open sales invoices, then I simply can click on that block. And when I do that, I'm going to get a list of just those open invoices. Notice that each of these lines are hyperlinked, so I do have the ability to actually click and drill, and then it'll show me the transaction as it was entered into the system. So you can see here is a particular sales invoice that has been created in Business Central, but has not been paid by the customer, so it's still an open invoice. Okay, so as we continue on down through, I did want to also talk a little bit about one other thing in regards to interacting with Excel. So you'll notice over here in my actions area, I also have an area called Excel reports. There are some out-of-the-box Excel reports. So you can see that most of them are related to either financial reporting or aging reports, etc. So if I were to select my aged accounts payable report, you'll notice when I click on that, it automatically launches Excel. And from here, then, the system will bring me into a templated report in Excel. Now, this takes a moment because I have some add-ins in Excel, but once it comes up, you'll see that I'll actually get to see a summarized aging for my vendors. And this is just one example. I'm going to show you a few others as we continue through the system where we can even do some really nice things about editing information in Excel and publishing it back into Business Central as well. So you'll see that in just a few minutes. Almost there. So you can see that it's starting to open my template right here. And then in a moment, you're going to see Excel, an Excel spreadsheet, and that Excel spreadsheet will actually contain aging information. So you can see here's the start of it. I'll enable editing, and you'll notice over here to the right, the system then starts to do a few things where it is validating me as a user because I'm using Office 365 here. So it's authenticating me as a user, and then it starts to load the data. So you can see it's retrieving that data now. And it's updating my workbook, and now I actually have an aged report. So this is just an example. There are some other ones that you can use. These are some really nice things in regards to examples might be that an auditor might be asking you for an age trial balance and they may want it in an Excel format. This may be too summarized for that, but just to give you some sense of some of the things that we might be able to handle. Okay, so as we continue on down, I wanted to show just a few more things related to our ability to interface with Excel. So if I go back into my sales area and I select my customers, then I'm going to be able to do some nice things here where I can select the page option, because you can see my list of customers. I go to the page option and I select edit in Excel. It's going to launch Excel as well. And so from here, what I'm going to be able to do is then open up a new sheet. That new sheet's going to actually include my customer base. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because what it allows me to do is actually do some editing here and publishing back into Business Central. Because oftentimes it's nice to be able to do it in one grid rather than having to go back into your particular screen by screen for each customer. So as an example, I might want to fill in my salesperson code for each of my customers. And so what I can do here, and I happen to know those codes, so I can actually come in and add those salesperson codes. Maybe a salesperson has left the organization and you're going to reassign them to a new salesperson, then you can start to actually go in and do this kind of work. So I'll just do a few of those. But now what I can do is I can publish that data back. And what that's going to do is that's going to send all of that information back into Business Central. So as an example, if I now go back into Business Central and I look at a Datum Corporation, then I should now have a salesperson code that's assigned and it should be PS. So you can see here that as I show more, oops, now PS is assigned. Before, there were no salespeople assigned. So really kind of makes it nice. One other thing that I wanted to talk about with Excel is a quick function that I think is very useful, And that's the ability to take this data out and then put it into some sort of pivot tables and charts. And so I'm going to do what's called a lookup here. And you'll notice that a lot of times I can go in and I can just type in a topic, and maybe I'm going to type in customer ledgers. And so when I do that, I'm going to pick ledger entries. And from here, then what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to take this information, and I'm going to go and again use my edit in Excel function. I'm going to open up Excel. I'm going to enable my editing here. And then you'll notice that it's going to start to fill in information. This is all activity that is inside of Business Central. So it's transactional. So what I'm going to do now is once this data fills in, I'm going to be able to go in and I'm going to be able to start to build a pivot table and start to slice and dice my data, and then I'm going to graph it real quickly. So I'm going to first of all go in and go to Insert, Pivot Table, and I'll click here. You'll notice that I can start to fill in some information. I, for instance, want the document type to be a filter. I want to put in the posting date. I want to put in the customer number, and I want to put in the original amount. Now, what you're going to see here is that I can start to slice and dice my information. So for instance, in the columns, I may want the years in the columns. So you can see that as I move that, it then allows me to do those types of things. Also, I may decide that I don't need the quarters. And you'll notice that I now have information here. As I come in and select the document type, this is going to include payments and it's going to include sales invoices. And so I could also come in and I'm going to take some of this information and compress it. But you can see then that I can come up here and say that I only want to see invoices. And when I do that, then my numbers will change. And I'm actually analyzing my data right inside of Business Central. Now from here, I can insert a chart. And all of a sudden, I got a nice metric that'll show me by period or by customer, depending on how I decide to do this. So I really wanted to focus on the access to information that's available there. So hopefully you'll find that that's very useful. As I go back into Business Central, I'm going to just show you a few more things related to navigation. Depending on your role, you have quick access to things like your certain posting or control accounts. You can make visible trial balance. And also you can have Power BI reports that are going to be visible for you as well. And there are a number of Power BI reports that are available to you that are templated, that are meant for Business Central. But you also, and you can see that I probably have 30 of them here, but you also have the ability to create your own Power BI reports. So to give you some sense, something that looks like this, these are some creations from the business intelligence team here at Velocio, but we can start to create this kind of graphic. Now we can create our own custom graphics and embed those inside of the Business Central interface as well. So again, I think really giving us some great capabilities to analyze our data. With Power BI, then we can expand this information, we can drill into the details. We also can set parameters and we can interface with our data in ways to put date ranges and restrictions so that we're really interacting proactively with our data rather than just letting the system throw us something static. Okay, so the next thing I thought might be useful is a little bit of time that we can spend on our interface with Outlook. So I'm going to go into my Outlook, and this is a web version of Office 365 Outlook. And what I'd like to show you now is just the ability to enter an email, create an email, I should say. And let's say, for instance, that I would like to send an email to Crystal York. Crystal works for a company called Fabricam, which is one of our vendors. So she's one of my contacts. I enter her name. You notice it came up just as you would expect in Outlook. But one of the things that's really great is that I have this ellipsis down here, and I can actually select Business Central, and I can select New, and I can actually create a document on the fly from Business Central inside of the Outlook interface. So you'll notice here in a moment that it's going to recognize that Crystal York actually works for one of our vendors, Fabricam. And so it will actually bring up a window that looks like my purchase order entry window. Now, you'll notice that also any alerts or things like that that the system was going to provide, it provides as well. And I can expand the window to give me more real estate right within my interface as well. And so this will then give me a good look at a purchase order entry window. And then I can come in and I can go ahead and start to enter the items that are on a PO. When I do a lookup, I can see all of my inventory items. So if I'm going to order London chairs, the system will allow me to select that. If I wanted to assign those to jobs, I could. I can also go in and enter a quantity and so forth. So I can actually, and it'll bring up my cost. And there are rules that you can set in regards to all of that. Now from here, if that were the only line item I were going to create, I could go in and I could hit the ellipsis. I could say send. And the system is actually going to create an email for me. I'm going to say send email. I'll click OK. Now, what I wanted to show you at this point is that if we close this down and we go to our sent box, then you're going to see an email that was sent to Crystal York. And the great thing about it is this purchase order is going to be included there. And it's going to have a PDF attachment that's included there that will allow you to see the purchase order as it was created. So what's nice about this is that we have a direct interface. Now, if you had workflow that was established inside of Business Central, then even working in Outlook would follow the rules that you've set up in Business Central. So if there's a workflow approval process on purchase orders, then that rule would have to be followed without any kind of argument about it. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to talk about while we're outside of Business Central is really what I would call, what used to be called Microsoft Flow, that is now called Power Automate. And so really you can think of this as an area where we can do a couple different things. We can create workflows such as approvals, but we also have the ability to create notifications. So first of all, what I'm going to show you is there are templates already created for Business Central that you can use. So when I select templates and then I type in Business Central, then what's going to happen is I'm going to get some very specific templates that are available for Business Central to do workflow. So as an example, requesting approval for a purchase order, onboarding a customer, invoice approval. These types of things are going to be built directly. They'll work alongside of Business Central to allow you to do that kind of thing. And there are probably 20 of them so that are available for you to use. Now, those are out of the box. Now you can create your own flows. And so I just wanted to give you a very simple, probably overly basic example of a notification that's been created. So what I have here is an inventory level notification. And so just to give you some sense of how this works, I'm going to go ahead and edit this flow. And really the workflow automation here is kind of like a decision tree. So what happens is that we set conditions, and then depending on the outcome, we have different additional decisions that we can make. So in this one, it's about as simple as you can get. If an inventory item has a quantity less than 10 and it says yes, then we're going to send an email and we're going to send it to the administration user. That way they're going to actually see a display that says this item has an inventory level of X, which means that it's less than 10, only if it qualifies. Now, more real life situations might be, hey, I want to see all my items that are below their reorder level. That probably is a little bit more realistic. Or I want to see a customer if they go beyond their credit limit, or et cetera, et cetera. So there are a variety of those different types of things that are going to be available for you to take care of this type of thing, to keep you ahead of the game, to keep you informed so that you can make quicker and better decisions. All right, so one last thing that I'd like to do as we continue down the path, and Michael had promised you this, so I'm going to deliver, is I would like to spend a moment and I would like to show you Business Central on my mobile phone. Now, I happen to have an Apple iPhone, and it's going to take me just a moment, but I'm going to show you Business Central on my phone and see the look and feel. But in reality, I have really a lot of flexibility to use the product and use it to do things. And I guess on your phone, things that you might use on your phone or a tablet while you're traveling might be, I want to look at dashboards, or perhaps I would like to look at, enter time if I'm a professional service organization, if I'm a construction company, those types of things. Or I might want to enter expenses. And so for that to happen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to do share my screen here for just a moment. So bear with me. Best laid plans. I promise I'm going to show you this. Bear with me. I'm going to have to restart something here real quick. My fault. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is that the system is going to allow you some great flexibility in regards to being able to, use the system as you would need to use it. So this is a great example here. So you may not recall, but if I actually were to move this over, you're going to see a block here for $205,599. That represents this number right here. So it's really replicating in a different screen form, all of the metrics that I have. I can click on that and it'll show me all of the transactions that make it up, etc. So, the idea is really very powerful. Now, another thing that you can do is you can come in and I get lists of my customers. These are our master records, and you can see all of them, pictures, numbers, etc. And I can open up a particular customer record as an example. And as I do that, then it'll show me the information that's appropriate for that customer. Again, in a more small form factor, but the idea is I have quick access to it. And then for executives, as an example, they may just be most interested in looking at some of their dashboards. So you can see here that I have my dashboards, my favorite accounts, my trial balance, all of those types of things are available as well. So really, with that in mind, I think the purpose of our discussion today was to really give you a good, quick look, understanding that the system is a full-fledged ERP solution, from accounting to distribution to manufacturing to service to projects, and certainly full-featured. I'm going to show one last thing, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Michael. You may recall that we talked about advanced project accounting. So I'm going to just take a moment, and remember we talked about roles. I'm going to switch roles and I'm going to log in as a project executive. As I log in as a project executive, my screen's going to look significantly different because my focus is very specifically on projects. And so as the system comes on, you'll notice that I now have focus on timesheets and projects and those types of things. The other thing that I wanted to point out here is this is advanced project accounting. This was actually developed by the Velocio team to work with Business Central. So when you are looking at niche type products to add to Business Central to complement what you do, you're going to have the capabilities to use tools like this, and they'll be meshed right into your existing environment.